everyone, and welcome once again to Geek Fest Rants. My name is Carlos Perone, and joining me today, I have both of our Steves. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello, everyone. It's going to be an especially dark commentary today.
What else is new?
Well, as you probably guessed, we're doing some sort of suspense horror type of movie because we're trying.
Us three?
Yeah, I know. That's what we ever do.
Usually, when it's Carlos and the Steves, you're going to get the crap scared out of you.
Yes.
Well, at least it's not a Carpenter film.
True.
But it's as close as you can get to a Carpenter film, probably.
Yeah,
even though it came out in 1990, it's 80s horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was made in the 80s.
Yeah. It's like anything in the 80s, you got to at least backtrack it 2 years because when they were putting it together, you got to go back 2 years. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we're talking about Exorcist 3. Obviously not the first or second one. We're going straight to number 3 because it is a movie that is it's very different than the original. And it's a movie that seems to always come up in some of our conversations and some of our favorite clips of scary movies. There's a lot of very memorable moments here. Now, just so you know, we're using the DVD copy because currently there is no formal Blu-ray version of it. So if you guys are queuing up this at home, we have the scene selection on the first chapter because it's one of these DVDs that it'll jump straight to the movie and it won't give you time to queue up. So what I would say is go to the chapter selection, highlight 1, 2, which is the first 2 chapters. And when I tell you to hit play now.
Just let the record show, I did offer to bring the Laserdisc version of this film, which I still have in a crate in my closet.
In the museum.
In the museum, yes.
Like the end of the Raiders film.
Mm-hmm.
It's
a
safe place.
So we're referring to the film as Exorcist 3, but for those cultists out there like myself, I often refer to it as Legion. The name of the book on which the film was based, or the book that was developed out of the screenplay that was originally written, depending on which side of the buffet table you're on.
Now here we have Ed Flanders, who was playing from St. Elsewhere. And wasn't he also on L.A. Law? Was he on L.A. Law?
No, he looked like the other guy.
Oh, okay. All right. So he wasn't.
He's a permed out Ed Flanders.
He's playing Father Dyer. This is what kind of screwed me up. When this came out in 1990, I had definitely seen Exorcist. But
the stairs.
There are the stairs, the infamous, iconic stairs. I hadn't seen it. I mean, maybe I had seen it 1 or 2 times, maybe 3. But I wasn't as well versed in the film as I am now. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't realizing that he was playing a character who was in the original film.
From the original, right.
Or the original film, the original book. As is George C. Scott, who's playing Lieutenant Kinderman, who was played by Lee J. Cobb in The Exorcist, and who passed away 2 to 3 years after the movie came out. So immediately, I'm a little thrown as a young person. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing this, and I'm like,
oh, Tubular Bells.
Tubular Bells.
Familiar score.
So,
would you say you need to see the first 2 films before?
Well, not the second. God knows, not the second. But the first one, it certainly wouldn't hurt. Honestly, though, I do believe you could get away with seeing the first.
I agree. I mean, and ultimately, the genesis of the story, while it was based on the events that happened in the first film, it was not meant. Blatty hadn't meant it to be a straight up exorcist film, and the actual exorcism that does take place, spoiler alert, I guess I should have said that first, was really an afterthought, and we can talk more about the production and the studio's involvement or lack thereof, but it does have its own distinct standalone storyline. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Especially because some of the actors are different from the original film.
Yeah, even though they're playing the same characters.
Now, how does this movie fit into? Didn't they later release something called Legion?
No, there's
it's very confusing.
There's the prequel to The Exorcist.
That's what I'm thinking about.
There are 2 versions of.
Yes.
One is directed by Rennie Harlan, and the other is directed by, was it Paul Mazursky?
I think so.
That
was the one that got that had much more issues.
Yeah, and that's a prequel story with the character of Father Merrin, who was played.
Africa or something?
Yes, who was played by Max von Sydow in the original, and I think it's Stellan Skarsgård in that.
Brad Dourif, yes.
Brad Dourif is in this.
Chucky.
So
Scott Wilson.
Herschel.
Yeah,
You know who
Herschel.
he is.
Why is that kid there? That's a creepy kid.
Well, a lot of it, we're going to get to this.
This movie
is so creepy.
scary. It is very scary.
We are watching this in the daytime, by the way, so we can save on diapers.
Now, the only connection to the original film is the presence of Jason Miller, who was also an afterthought.
Dammy.
Harry Carey Jr.? Is he not a baseball player?
No. So
Well, we saw Morgan Creek in the beginning. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about the events leading up to the film?
Morgan Creek was a production company that came around in the late 80s, early 90s, and they came to prominence at that time with a bunch of films that did very well. You had Sleeping with the Enemy, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. They were really doing very well for themselves at the time. And they also came around at a time when other smaller outfits like Carolco came into being. And they bought this property. And the driving force behind the purchase of Legion was Joe Roth, who later became head of Fox. He shepherded this through its production, or at least through some of its production, as with Nightbreed, Clive Barker's Nightbreed. And then I don't know at what point in the development of both of those films he left, but when he left, the remaining partner, James Robinson, he didn't know what to do with this. He especially did not know what to do with Exorcist, because he let his secretary tell him that since the movie had no exorcism, it needed an exorcism, and demanded that, and we'll get to this as it goes on, but
Thank God for his secretary.
After the movie had already been shot and previewed, said, you know what, this movie needs an exorcism. It's an exorcist movie. Meanwhile, Blatty was begging them not to
call it that.
Not
right.
to call it any. You're calling it Exorcist 3 as if to say you're acknowledging the existence of Exorcist 2,
correct?
Which, as Steve said, is an abomination, and it is just completely, it's not a creation of Blatty at all. So the fact that you're acknowledging its existence is a huge mistake.
And despite overtures by Blatty to the studio to say, please do not attach that word exorcist to this, based on the box office performance or lack thereof, the studio then finally acknowledged, hey, you know what? We probably shouldn't have called it exorcist, whatever.
Right.
Much to his dismay. Yeah. But you notice he's all over the place, writer, director, he was heavily involved, but was not originally attached to direct this film. This came out of the original Exorcist. Friedkin was attached to it at one point. John Carpenter was actually attached to the film.
One of our heroes.
Not too far from when they actually did go into production.
Whoa.
But ultimately, that fell through, and Blatty stepped up in order to try to preserve his artistic vision.
Now, what's interesting, there's a scene that was cut where Lieutenant Kinderman is with Father Damien Karras. I'm sorry, not at the moment of his death. There's a still of him viewing Karras's body in the morgue, but it was Brad Dourif. Mm-hmm. They didn't bring Jason Miller in until after the movie had been screened once already, and not only did they need an exorcism, but they needed a connector to the original film. Right. So they bring in Jason Miller, who played Father Karras.
And they didn't have him for very long. They probably only had him for maybe
weeks, maybe at the most,
that.
At the most.
So they essentially just reshot all of the Brad Dourif scenes, and then Blatty decided to intercut them together based on which character was actually present, whether it was the Gemini killer, who was based on the Zodiac killer, loosely, according to Blatty, or Father Karras.
Something that passed by quickly. Lee Richardson, who was the priest in that scene with Father Dyer, he was in The Fly too, and he asked him what his favorite movie was, and he says, The Fly.
George C. Scott!
Now, I think at this point in George's career, I mean, he had just he had run his course in terms of being on the A-list. And, I mean, I think he's a phenomenal actor, but top-lining a horror film, there's not much. I mean, he really wasn't getting a lot of offers at the time. One of the things that's also interesting is that, and I can't speak for the original novel of The Exorcist, but in the movie, the character of Lieutenant Kinderman is a very small character.
Right.
He doesn't have a lot going on. But Grand Bush,
He's in a lot of movies.
Special Agent Johnson,
Right.
no relation.
Just like back in I was in junior high, dickhead.
So they're playing up the fact in this film that Lieutenant Kinderman and Father Karras were very close.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie, they barely knew each other. In the book, I can't say if Blatty was going off the book or he was just enhancing it for this film. But there was also an intimation through a deleted scene that has since been restored to The Exorcist that he had a close friendship with this Father Dyer character. That they were. I'm actually not sure if it's in the restored version, but it is a deleted scene that has been seen where at the end of The Exorcist, Kinderman says to Father Dyer, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, like the scene in Casablanca.
Is that the Goya lady?
I think so.
Goya. Oh, boy.
Oh, boy, yeah.
You remember that, Carlos, from the Goya commercials?
Now, it's also interesting that the original actor who played Father Dyer was not. I don't know if he was asked to reprise the role. He's a real priest,
Yeah.
and he's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Father William O'Malley, who I thought did a really good job in The Exorcist. So I don't know if they needed a bigger name actor or if he wasn't available. I honestly can't speak.
This might
for
be
that.
a bigger role, more lines, more.
But he was really good in The Exorcist. But I guess if they figured that Lee J. Cobb had passed away, then what was the point of
Right, just reset the
reset it.
tables. Mm-hmm.
Now, what this movie is conspicuous for is its lack of gore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're talking about a movie that came out around the time of the slashers
Mm-hmm.
when they were in their heyday, and this movie relies on good old-fashioned...
Yeah, and some scares.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A completely creepy atmosphere and some really, really thrilling sequences.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we haven't really seen anything up until this point, but every time they cut to a new shot, you half expect something to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the camera's moving. There's a slight dolly occurring. Why are we moving in? What's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that sense of dread watching the movie from the very first time until the 100th time watching it.
Now, did you guys both see it in the theater?
I did.
I did as well.
And I'll tell you, I vividly remember it because I saw it opening night and with a couple of friends, and we came out of it saying, this movie is phenomenal. This movie is going to be huge.
Yeah.
And I remember vividly that it was not reviewed, which is always a bad sign on opening day. We saw it. We loved it. The next day, the reviews, 0 stars. I was flabbergasted at the reception that this got from the critics. Because I thought this was a throwback. I mean, all right, just don't compare it to The Exorcist.
But they couldn't, and that was the issue.
And that was, I mean, just by...
See Everett Koop and Larry King.
Larry King. Oh, there are a lot of cameos in this movie.
Wow.
But it was shocking to me.
Yeah.
I mean, this and I also remember my father had read the novel Legion, and he said it was terrific. So I just couldn't believe it. I guess you saw it on cable.
Probably.
Some of the other Morgan Creek films that were pretty big, Pacific Heights, the Major League films, the Ace Ventura films. James Robinson is still chairman and CEO of Morgan Creek. I know his son has come into play, but he's still they're still churning them out.
Well, and so Morgan Creek was bidding for the rights to the story with Carolco,
Right.
and Carolco wound up making Repossessed, the
Linda Blair.
Exorcist parody with Linda Blair.
That's terrible.
So they made their Exorcist film ultimately.
So Linda Blair has the distinction of being an Exorcist 2 and Repossessed.
Yes.
Yeah, Linda Blair, I've met her. She's not that nice.
Are the cameos just to kind of emphasize they're in Washington, D.C., and you have these?
Well, those cameos maybe, but the cameos that we'll see later are really just kind of wacky.
But I would say, yeah, Larry, because Larry, I think, was the D.C. bureau at that time, and Sierra Coop,
Surgeon General.
being there. Well, it had a pretty modest budget. It was the budget was $11 million. I think domestic was probably somewhere in the 40 million range. So it did okay.
Yeah, it did okay. And I mean the murders in the film are horrific, but you never see anything. You don't see any gore. What he's describing here, I mean, the Gemini killer it really delights in the act of murder.
This is almost like the type of stuff they talk about is the type of stuff they show on Silence of the Lambs.
Right.
These two don't look good.
Now, the voice that you're hearing right now is Colleen Dewhurst. Colleen Dewhurst was married twice to George C. Scott.
And divorced twice from George C. Scott.
And goes uncredited. Her voice is reminiscent of Mercedes McCambridge, who played the voice of Pazuzu in The Exorcist. It's purposeful.
Now, I did some research on Pazuzu, because when you see the original Exorcist, or let's say you have seen it and it's really not that apparent, you just think, well, Satan is possessing young Regan and possessing the people in this film. But Pazuzu is actually a Syrian Babylonian demon who also fought other demons. So it's a bit nebulous as far as the intent of evil on the part of Pazuzu. And within this film, later on, we do seemingly hear the voice of Pazuzu, or perhaps
the devil
Satan himself.
Now, what we're looking at here is the murderer. That old lady just committed this crime. Now, there is a very, very infamous still. The film, like we said, very, very lacking in gore, but there is a picture that you can find very easily on the internet of the priest in the confessional holding his head. And that's one of the scenes that I guess you could say Holy Grail scene for fans of this film.
This is just because this is the particular cut of the film that they decided to remove all the gore out of it.
Well, I don't know why that one might have been a ratings issue. That particular cut. We didn't mention it when it was going on, but that whole opening shot, I guess it's a dolly shot, where they're going down the street.
That actually was a Steadicam.
Steadicam?
Yeah. Or the early version of a Steadicam, like a Panaglide or something like that.
When they get into the church and you see the eyes of Christ open up, that's pretty yikes.
He's checking the priest's hand for a very deliberate reason. See, one of his fingers is removed.
Yes.
See, Kinderman thinks that this is the return of perhaps a copycat or somebody who knew this Gemini killer that we're going to learn more about later on, who would leave distinct marks on his victims. And what we're going to find out is these marks were not fully disclosed to the public for fear of copycats and not being able to find the real Gemini killer. So
to weed out the crazy.
Exactly. So whereas they would say the symbol, the astrological symbol was carved into the back, in reality, it was carved into the palm. So you see he checked the other hand. He's checking to see if there's a symbol in the palm. The first hand he checked, I believe, was the index finger is removed.
That was missing. Yeah.
And what they told people was he removed the thumb. So he's starting to put the pieces together that either something is not right, because not many people would know about this.
Right. Blatty's only other directorial credit, I believe, is a film called The Ninth Configuration, which I've seen, and it's bizarre.
Well, some of the people from that
Yes.
movie are in there. Ed Flanders was in that,
Yep.
right?
And Jason Miller. Mm-hmm. I think Stacy Keach. I mean, the film is just bizarre. But I have to say, as a director, he really knew what he was doing. What I was saying before about the connections to the original are they're not as apparent to people who saw the first film, even who saw the first film a lot, because this young boy who was, I mean, we're going to find this out later, but this young boy who was killed because his mother worked on the original case, Reagan's case. Mm-hmm. And she's not even a character in the first movie, and the character who they're referencing was a man. So he changed some stuff. I like the relationship that George C. Scott and Ed Flanders have. They're back and forth. They have a nice repartee.
Uh-oh. He's going old Jersey Scott on him.
Hey, that's what's her name? She's from Boys in the Hood.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
She played the mother of Ice Cube, I think. Yes.
Okay.
Remember Doughboy?
Yes.
And he had the half brother who was the football player. Uh-huh. Yeah, she was the mother.
Oh.
They do a nice job of, especially through their dialogue, of introducing the religion aspects of the story. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They're setting the table for the larger conversation that's, you know, that we're going to be faced with. Is that what he said?
Yes. The rapport between these two, it's almost like a play.
Yeah, well,
you get this.
It's good because
like a 40s or 50s type of.
It's snappy pattern.
Yeah.
It's very reminiscent of, like you said, 30s, 40s films, but it's good because when he dies, you in a short amount of time, they establish their very close friendship. And, well, look at this.
Oh, that's not good. That can't be good.
But they establish a close friendship between them, and then when he does die, you see how upset he is, and you believe it. I like your shades.
Who is that guy? He's from something else.
George DeCenzo.
It's Sala. No, it's not.
No, he's a that guy. He was in a lot of films at the time.
Unusual close-ups.
Mm-hmm.
It's very unusual.
Like I said, I mean, Blatty, for a second-time director, I mean, he shows chops. And the film is also a great mystery. This guy's been in a lot of stuff, too. Love the
What is
the
it? You
shades.
can't figure out how that door was open?
How it was closed. See, George C. Scott thinks that, now he's really puzzled because he thinks he's got it all figured out. Well, it's the same person because it's the telltale Gemini signs. But what he doesn't know is that someone's jumping from body to body.
I like to also say, so far, the sound is very creepy. Mm-hmm. What little we've heard so far, it's...
And, when they do bring in... it's jarring. When you get to certain scenes... to sort of punctuate a scary scene, they do it very effectively.
You know what? It reminds me a little bit of the Italian, Mario Bava?
Mario Bava?
That type of style.
Well, here we have the wackiest dream ever, and we're going to see a lot of famous people. Now, that voice sounds just like Lee J. Cobb, who played Kinderman in the original.
That's Tony.
Okay.
Yikes.
There's the priest with his head somewhat back on.
Now, I think we're going to see right about... Oh, it's Fabio.
Fabio.
What the hell?
There he is. Nick Fury. Samuel Jackson.
Oh, my God.
Dubbed.
And there's the little boy. And here we have...
This is like something out of Twin Peaks.
Just to enhance the Georgetown connection.
Yeah, Patrick Ewing.
Now you know who he is, right, Collins?
Never heard of him.
He's a basketball player.
He plays
Played
sports.
for Georgetown.
And there he is.
Okay.
Now that scene right there where the priest is going up and down on the bed, I wonder if that's actually happening or that's part of his dream. We bring in helicopters.
Okay, so we have another extended point of view shot.
So if you read the book Legion, you already by this point realized that these murders, the people who were being killed, had some connection to the Reagan McNeil case. But
but the movie really hasn't.
The movie hasn't touched it yet. It will soon enough.
So far as a serial killer,
right? And you don't know why he's targeting these people. But now Father Dyer is the first person we know, or that we should know, had something to do with the Reagan case.
You checking the hands?
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if Kinderman at this point is willing to acknowledge that there might be something supernatural going on. Because how could anybody, or if not supernatural, how would anybody know who wasn't on the inside, so to speak, who wasn't a cop?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because at least at this point you could say, well, maybe it's a cop.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right?
If not a cop, then
right.
No one else.
What's on top? What's that garbage bag up there?
You'll see. Little message to Kinderman.
Now they never caught the Zodiac killer, correct? I believe they never caught him.
No, I don't think so.
No.
The movie had theories on
Mm-hmm.
who it might be.
That was a great movie. That was your boy David Fincher,
That's right.
director of Alien 3.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, I just had to get that in there.
So you see, It's a Wonderful, the two L's.
Double L.
That was another telltale giveaway that it's the Gemini. Because in his letters, he would use double L's, and nobody knew that.
So at this point, Kinderman is like, what the hell?
So the bulk of the film was shot on location in Georgetown. I know they also did some studio stuff down in North Carolina.
Oh, she's a sweetheart, this one. Now, as late as 1990, they were letting people smoke in hospitals.
Yeah.
This one is really Miss Personality. Have we all seen Exorcist 2?
I don't remember.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. To call that movie a hot mess would be an understatement.
Now, how long before he died?
Who died?
George C. Scott.
George C. Scott, I believe, died around 1990, 99, I mean, or 2000. So he had about
couple good runs.
9-10 more years before he passed away.
Ooh, there's a fly on their thing. You see that?
Yeah. She's really trying his patience.
That's me.
That actress right there is Vivica Lynn Fleurs, who did many, many movies in the 40s, 50s. But genre fans might know her. And she was in Stargate with James Spader.
Right. I remember her.
Yep.
She was working with the science team.
Yep.
Right.
I take it back. That's me.
There he is.
Come on.
Herschel.
Oh, is that boy looking young and vigorous?
That's incredible.
With a full head of
without
hair.
that beard, he looks so different.
That's the Colleen Dewhurst voice right there.
Ooh.
I love Scott Wilson in this. That cigarette. The ever-present cigarette. And then there's Mrs. Clearly. There is only one, prior to the exorcism scene, which was a reshoot, there is only one special effects shot in the whole movie, and it has to do with this lady right here.
Is it the ceiling stuff?
Yep.
That's freaky.
Isn't that freaky? I mean, we'll see that later.
Mm-hmm. Want to hear some Scott Wilson roles?
Sure.
Okay, we'll go way back.
Because I don't know any of them, to be honest with you.
1967, In the Heat of the Night.
Wow.
Harvey Oberst.
Classic.
In Cold Blood.
Another classic. Wow, he's been around.
He was in The Great Gatsby. Played George Wilson. He was in The Right Stuff.
Wow.
Played Scott Crossfield. Johnny Handsome.
Oh my God! I think that's
Mickey
a very
Rourke. That's
underrated film.
I agree.
Which someday we should do a commentary on.
Young Guns 2. Morgan
Another
Creek.
Morgan Creek film, and probably part of a deal.
Probably.
You know.
He was in Judge Dredd.
Oh my God!
As Pa Angel,
Oh
uncredited.
God. How interesting must it be, somebody like him, who's been an actor for almost 50 years, to gain the popularity that he has now? I mean,
With The Walking Dead.
with The Walking Dead. You know, all of a sudden he's this in-demand guy at conventions, and everybody wants his autograph, and he's enjoying a celebrity that he never ever could have imagined.
Mm-hmm. And I do remember him from CSI.
Oh,
he
really?
played Catherine Willow's father.
Okay.
She was his illegitimate daughter.
Oh yeah.
He played Sam Braun. He was
He
like
was
an
the
old
gangster.
time, like an old Vegas casino
You're right.
owner.
Oh my God.
And has he always done the clean shaven look? You know, not
Yeah, I think so.
On that,
The
yeah.
Herschel-y kind of bearded.
That's right. I completely forgot about that.
The only I watched this movie about 2 weeks ago, and I'll be honest with you. Even though I watched Walking Dead, I don't know many of the actors' names, and so his name doesn't jump out at me. And the only reason I knew who he was the voice.
The eyes. It's in the eyes.
I'm like, who the hell is this guy?
If I smoked, I would hold a cigarette like that.
He reminds me of the lawyer that Martin Short played in Saturday Night Live with the. I didn't say that. You said that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Ow. Now that's Jason Miller's voice. And I'm wondering if that is Jason Miller right there or if that's Brad Dourif.
That's not Brad Dourif's voice.
No, I said it's Jason Miller's voice.
Oh, okay.
I just want to see if that's...
I think it is Jason Miller.
Yeah, that's definitely Jason Miller. Now, I have to say, of all the studio-imposed restrictions or additions that were put upon this film, I don't have a problem with Jason Miller being in it.
That guy was from Happy Days.
He was also in Running Man.
And he's on a commercial now, like
Yeah,
some
he's
cell phone commercial or like a Skype. They're doing like a
And he got
Skype
the
thing,
gray
right?
hair now.
Yeah.
And I
what
remember
is his name?
his in Running Man. He's Arnold Schwarzenegger's court-appointed agent,
Right.
And he's like, "Here, use my back, victim."
Right.
and Schwarzenegger puts the pen in his back.
He's one of the Malachi brothers from Happy Days.
Oh my God, the Malachi Crunch.
Yeah, remember?
Oh my God.
The one guy's name was Myron, and what was his name? I forget.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, it's time for George C. Scott to go George C. Scott on him. Come on. Soon. And now we're getting exposition. But important exposition.
Yes.
And I like George C. Scott's delivery. I love the performance he's giving of just being so shell shocked. I mean, he's also dealing with the death of his friend, which you can see it's wearing on him, but also the disbelief that he's experiencing.
Uh-oh.
See, and he's losing it because his friend is dead. He really was a terrific actor.
Mm-hmm.
He did a version of A Christmas Carol. He played Scrooge.
Oh yeah.
And honestly, I'm a huge fan of Christmas Carol and its adaptations, and I think he's in like the top 3 Scrooges with Patrick Stewart and Alistair Sim. Yeah,
That's my favorite.
That's my favorite too. But his version, number 2. And it was a British TV movie, and he's the only American actor in it. He does a great British accent, and he just nails the character. But I mean, everybody remembers him as Patton.
I actually remember him from Taps.
Taps?
Remember?
Yes.
General Beige.
Taps is a great movie.
Yeah.
You ever see Taps?
It was the outsiders of its time.
Yes.
Everybody
Tom
and their
Cruise,
grandmother was in it.
Timothy Hutton.
Timothy Hutton.
Sean
Penn.
Penn. Yeah.
Sean Penn. Tom Cruise went nuts at the end of that movie.
Yeah, with the M60.
Yeah.
He was a little kid. There you go, the double L's.
Now, I'm assuming that using the double L's is an affectation. It's not something that he doesn't know how to spell.
Now that point is somewhat lost for the remainder of the film.
It is.
Because that is ultimately the Gemini's motivation.
It is.
His father. And
father,
getting
right.
back at his father.
And the original ending of I believe the novel, is that when the Gemini dies, or his work is done when his father dies.
His father dies of natural causes. He dies of a heart attack.
And then Gemini just stops.
And he stops because his MO has evaporated.
And you know what's interesting? Why even mention that if you're going to drop the point?
Right.
Look at that. Look at those babies. Jeez. Those will come into play later.
Yes.
Another great scene.
Now, what is the purpose of that instrument? To sever what? Bone?
These are like autopsy tools.
Uh-oh. Snip, snip.
Exposition. exposition, exposition, exposition. Now, the original Exorcist film is very well known for its use of subliminal sequences. You would see Pazuzu, in a lightning flash, or in a shadow or something over Reagan's face. You'd see Pazuzu or something. In this film, it's not quite subliminal. It's a little bit more overt. There's going to be a sequence coming up. There's a lightning storm going on, and here we have the clock just stopped, but the religious statue we just saw, it's a little bit of a blink and you'll miss it kind of thing, where there's the flash and you see the statue, and the statue looks exactly like Jack Nicholson in the Joker makeup with a knife.
Dude, the clock stopped.
Yeah.
Somebody do something.
Somebody whispering.
So within these two scenes, the scene with the doctor in the previous, the hospital administrator, and this scene, you're basically getting everything you need to know.
Well, they're mentioning Reagan now for the first time. Creepy.
And I don't think that Kinderman. It's coming very soon. I don't think Kinderman really bought the whole possession thing of the first film. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not a lightning flash. It's the power flashing. So, really, it's coming.
This is where you start booking your retirement plans.
Yeah. Here we go. There it is. I wouldn't exactly call that subliminal. They give you plenty of time to see it.
But he doesn't see it.
Right. And you've gotten the knowledge now, too, that the priest who was murdered was somebody who gave permission for Father Merrin and Father Karras to do the exorcism in the first film. But again, he's not a character in the original film. Or if he's supposed to be the same character, nobody knows. Nobody's getting it.
Just messing with you, Bill.
Lee Richardson is a great character actor who had been in The Fly 2, which another film I think is underrated. Directed by Chris Wallace, the sequel to the David Cronenberg one.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it's terrible. I mean, we're not here to talk about it.
Is that Eric Stoltz?
Yeah, Eric Stoltz.
Yeah.
I thought that wasn't bad. It wasn't a classic. Now here they're shoehorning in this is the first evidence of a reshoot, because they're talking about the priest who was going to perform the exorcism later on in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Blatty himself, when the studio came back to him and said, you need X, Y, and Z, he knew that they were going to do it with or without him.
Yeah, so he said, if somebody's going to do this, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
It was a losing battle. Right. So they greenlit, I think it was $4 million to redo the end.
Yeah.
Because of the effects. That's why it was so expensive.
And I have to say that of all the films that we have learned since that have been tinkered with in post-production, a lot of times it's apparent when you're watching the film. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest and say that when I saw this film for the first time, well, first of all, it was news to me.
It didn't feel out of place.
No, it did not feel out of place.
It feels organic to the film.
It feels very organic to the film.
And I think that's because Blatty was so involved, and because he is a master storyteller. So he found a way to retrofit something into a completed work.
Yeah, and so it's to his credit that he complied. I mean, a lot of directors would get very huffy and be like, F you, I'm Alan Smithy now, and, he felt strongly enough about the story to do it himself. Here we have Nicole Williamson. Now, come on, Carlos. Who's Nicole Williamson? What was he in? Genre film.
Excalibur. Merlin. Yeah, he played Merlin.
So now this is something that filmed completely after the fact. I mean, his presence in the movie, watching it years later, knowing what we know now, it does feel out of place. But as Steve pointed out, I have to say, I agree with Steve. As he pointed out, it feels organic to the story.
I agree with Steve, agreeing with Steve.
Not agreeing with Carlos.
Oh, look at that.
Look at that. Now, these little subtle touches, I think are great. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sorry, Tony. I don't think that's. I don't think what's going on is wonderful, but I think that it's the subtlety.
Well, they're
The
upping
crucifix weeping blood is awesome.
I love it.
They're upping the ante every time they show you.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like no more subtle anything.
Right.
It's like the cat's out of the bag when you have something like
They killed
this.
his little birdie that he was nursing back to health. So now, no dialogue. You're not going to see him again. Ooh, look at that high-tech computer.
It's just like CSI.
CODIS.
CODIS. I know what that means because I watch Law & Order. Mrs. Clelia. Or should I say, Spider-Woman.
The original Spider-Man. Now, do we ever get a head count of how many bodies this thing is hopping? Or it's just uncontrollable? There's so many of them that you can't keep track.
In this film alone, I think we're talking at least five jumps. There are a couple of fan sites devoted to Exorcist 3 or Legion, whatever you prefer. And there is also a fan edit that I have and I have not gotten the chance to watch. Nice. That does its best to restore Blatty's original vision. And it's very widely available online.
It's just using existing footage from the film itself,
Yes.
right? It doesn't
Yeah.
forgotten or lost footage.
That's lost. But in the case of Exorcist 3, to approximate Blatty's vision, it's more about taking out than putting in.
Right.
So you could do a fan edit could happen very easily.
Oh, so Herschel's out of his mind too.
Oh, he's nuts. The C&O Canal. So this guy has an office. I mean, look what the kind of pictures he's got in his office.
Has anyone ever seen his
I'm
office?
saying to myself,
I know,
seriously?
like topless girls. And I don't know that he's necessarily crazy, but he is being influenced by darker forces.
Yes.
He has to be
He's-
escorted out of there.
Seemingly being blackmailed to lead George C. Scott exactly where
Down the road.
Pazuzu, the Gemini, whoever
Satan.
wants him to go. So he's just a puppet at this point, rehearsing this.
I love it. How he's lighting
monologue.
the old cigarette. Some of the statues look a little bit like Pazuzu. I mean, he's combining like religious iconography with demon iconography with naked chicks.
That statue behind him, isn't that from the first film?
It looks. Well, I just mentioned it looks very similar.
He's
to
looking at his
Pazuzu.
notes. That's why he keeps looking down.
This is a great scene.
It's Herschel.
I knew you'd be excited. That woke you up. And look at that picture of him.
And you see his hands on that picture? They're all creepy.
I know, and it's like a monument to himself. And look at all the cigarettes in the ashtrays. He's got 2 ashtrays. You know what? I just realized I need to get his autograph. I got to get his autograph. I need his autograph. I'm not a big Walking Dead autograph fan, but his I need to get. And you know what I would do? I would send him a picture from this, and he'd be impressed. And he'd want to meet me. He'd want to talk to me.
And then he'll take you out for
Take
dinner.
me out for drinks.
And then you would look into his
And we'd be
deep
friends.
blue eyes.
And we would talk about
and
Exorcist
he
3.
would hold your hand.
Be his biographer.
And then he would put you on his will.
Yep.
And give you all the
And
collectibles he's ever had.
and he'd give me a walk on Walking Dead. I'd be a zombie.
Yeah,
Well, you can do that without
Wake
him.
up, Steve!
would
Steve, wake up, Steve! Wake up! It's,
What?
we're watching Exorcist 3 here. What's
Oh,
going on?
okay.
You faded out a little bit. Uh-oh. Oh,
Now,
creepiness.
why is he so stunned? Now, this is my question. When Kinderman is inside the cell talking to Gemini, is he seeing Damien Karras or is he seeing the Gemini?
Well, when they shot it, he
Well,
was
yeah.
all right. So in the movie,
I'm just talking about in the
he's
movie.
seeing
What is manifesting?
Father Karras
Okay.
because that is the body that Pazuzu allowed Gemini to jump into.
Right.
At the moment of death, seeming death, when he goes down the stairs, he pops him in.
Pops him in.
Yeah. It just so happened that they took him and locked him up, so he couldn't do anything.
Right. So it really made sense. Again, I know it was an afterthought, but it really made sense to get Jason Miller in there.
Sure.
Jason Miller, just to mention him, was really quite a playwright.
Yes,
he-
that championship season. Mm-hmm.
And I want to say The Exorcist was his first film. I'm not 100% on that, but it might.
I think it might have been.
It might have been. And he didn't do a heck of a lot in terms
No.
of film roles. The only other, besides Ninth Configuration, the other one that sticks out in my mind is he was in Rudy.
Yeah, he played Ara Parseghian. Yeah.
Yes. And sadly, he passed away in 2001. He was relatively young.
Yeah, he was like 60, in his early 60s.
Early 60s.
I'm sorry, again.
Oh, I was just going to say he did manage to participate in some of the. There was an excellent documentary called Fear of God, done by an actor, a British film historian named Mark Kermode, and Jason Miller is interviewed extensively on that. There he is. Now,
Jason Miller's son is Jason Patrick. And Jason Miller married Jackie Gleason's daughter.
Yep.
So Jackie Gleason is Jason Patrick's grandfather.
That's right. Isn't that great?
You can kind of see the resemblance, too. You know, especially when Jason Patrick had all his hair.
Yes. So really, the only moment that Karras manifests himself is at the end when he's telling Bill, "Kill me now."
Yes.
I mean, right? Every line of dialogue that we hear coming out of Karras is the Gemini speaking. You know, it's funny with the exception of a few really, really great scary scenes. punctuating a lot of just exposition for the rest of the movie. You're getting the movie basically is now becoming a dialogue between the Gemini and Kinderman. Again, with just a few scenes interspersed that are admittedly fantastic.
But it's so good. But I mean, the performances I mean, the script is extremely well written. Yes. Okay, because the words have to come off the page and they have to mean something. But the way these guys deliver it, Jason Miller, George C. Scott, Brad Dourif, you want to know more detail about what has happened in this last 15 years. Tell me more about these murders. Like, what is wrong with this guy that he's doing this? Like, just completely diabolically creative murders.
Yep. Absolutely. And as good as I think Jason Miller is in these sequences, Brad Dourif knocks it out of the park.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could make the argument that he might maybe take it a little too far, but I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
I think when the Gemini is really fired up, Brad Dourif is just, I mean, he's perfect. He nails it. And I mean, we haven't seen him yet, so I'm jumping the gun a little, but I think he is a phenomenal actor.
And I really, you know, at the time, this is 1990, this came out, I really wasn't too familiar with him.
Me neither.
And then subsequently, you know, having the opportunity to see many more films that he had done, boy, what a great actor.
You know, the film that was a breeding ground for so many wonderful actors, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Brad Dourif, Danny DeVito.
He showed up in Dune also.
Oh, he was in Dune?
Yep.
So many people showed up in Dune.
Patrick Stewart.
Yes. Sting.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Grima. Wormtongue.
Brad Dourif was also excellent in Deadwood.
Yeah.
Oh my God, is the town doctor. Also, voice of Chucky.
Voice of Chucky, and I think we have a little nod to Chucky coming up.
We do?
Yes.
All right, you pointed out. Killing Daddy. Here he is. Now, there is a shot that the only deleted footage that has ever been seen anywhere is in the actual trailer. And it's a very, very crude morphing shot between Brad Dourif and Jason Miller. I mean, it's quick, but you can see it, and it looks... It's cheesy. It's very cheesy. It's very low tech, but it's there. And I'm pretty sure that it's meant to take place during the final sequence. The fan edit that I mentioned before, it's got legs, and it's very popular. And Brad Dourif himself introduced it at a horror convention. Just like the Cabal cut for Nightbreed has been screened at conventions, so has this, the fan edit. You know, he vacillates from just completely crazy to very sort of matter of fact.
When you hear how he's manipulating the timbre of his voice as well.
Yeah. That didn't sound like his voice.
They keep messing with his voice.
Yeah. There are moments where, I mean, they may be modulating it, but there are moments where I think he's being dubbed. Putting The Exorcist in the title just doomed this film. It just, it's almost like 2010. That's a film I think that works very well, but you it's the sequel to a masterpiece. So the if you can sever the connection somehow. Well, in this case, the novel's called Legion. Call it Legion.
He always plays these characters. He's just made for this. Oh,
there you go. So that the next murder is a gift that Gemini is getting, because to this point he's been doing the bidding of Pazuzu, Satan, whoever, and killing people who, got rid of him. And,
it's just a revenge thing.
Yeah. Every murder in this movie has been related to the Reagan McNeil case.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I read that there's a book supposedly coming out called The Evolution of William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist 3 from Concept to Novel to Screen. That's going to reveal the entire story behind the film's development, published never-before-seen images, the original script, studio notes, drafts of the story, and it's going to have interviews with Blatty, Brad Dourif, Mark Kermode, John Carpenter, and others associated with the film. This guy I mentioned, Mark Kermode, who's a British film historian / critic, even though it's been announced that, or it's been put out there that the footage has been lost from the original version of Exorcist 3, he is determined to unearth it. And I've seen YouTube clips of him. I mean, the man is an exorcist expert, and he actually is the guy who found a lot of the deleted footage from the original Exorcist, the spider walk scene and all these other scenes. And he is, without question, the expert on these films. And I have faith that eventually, if anybody's going to turn it up, it's going to be him. And I really hope he does. People have likened this film, not in terms of comparing it because it's such a great film, but there are people, I don't know, Steve probably knows, I don't know about Carlos, but the Orson Welles film, The Magnificent Ambersons,
yeah.
which is I think is considered the holy grail of lost films. I mean, it's not a lost film, it exists, but the original cut has been lost. And I think any film historian, critic, whatever, worth his salt, that's at the top of their list.
Right.
That's the one they want to see, that original cut. And for a lot of people in the horror biz, Exorcist 3, that's the one. That's the one they want to see, the original cut. And when you see these other films like Nightbreed, when all hope has been lost, then, somewhere, somehow, it shows up.
They find a way.
So
yeah.
you just have to keep on hoping, because there really is a groundswell for the recovery of the footage of this film, because like so many of the films that the three of us enjoy, these are films that, while we may have loved them from the start, their reputation just grew and grew and grew over the years. They might have been bombs when they came out, but we knew, we got it.
Yeah.
But through cable and DVD and all these other various platforms, the popularity has increased, and this film is definitely, I think it's one of the few that's left on the shelf, so to speak, because there hasn't even been a special edition. I mean, forget the fact that they don't have the footage to do a director's cut, but there's never been a DVD with a commentary.
Updated commentary.
I mean, William Blatty, he's alive, and Hardy. You could get it. You could do some extras. You could get Brad Dourif. He seems very happy to discuss it. Some of these actors have passed on, but there's enough out there that you could still do, at the very least, a special edition. Like Shout Factory needs to get its hands on this film. They do.
Well, not to segue into another film, but speaking of restoration and rediscovery of lost elements, the Black Angel short, Carlos.
Yeah. I never heard of that. And
I
all
had
of a sudden,
I had never heard of it either. It apparently was a short film that
only played in like Australia and Europe.
and the UK.
Yeah.
Before The Empire Strikes Back, and apparently, when the original Star Wars, A New Hope played, they did something similar in that in some of the theaters they would play somewhat of a companion piece as a primer.
Like a pre-palate cleanser.
Exactly, very much like the
Pixar's,
Pixar animation films where they would have the light Luxo Junior, those little short Paperman. So too. During the Star Wars era, these were happening, and there was this film called Black Angel. It was a 30-minute, 25-minute film that was actually shot in Scotland, and it was
the production designer.
It was the one of the production designers from Star Wars: A New Hope.
Oh.
And Lucas had been seeking something to show before Empire, and he had this script from film school. I forget the guy's name. We can look it up probably quickly. But he said, well, I have this. Maybe we can pull it through. So they had a very modest budget, I think for $50,000 or something of that nature. And they went over to Scotland and shot with a very small crew and were able to get into some locations that you would not be able to get into with a real Hollywood production unit. And it was a medieval, swords and not necessarily sorcerers, but very much I guess some could say a precursor to Excalibur, which we were talking about before, funny enough, with Nicole Williamson. And for over 20 years, it was thought to have been lost. Now, that film came out in 1980, right? So even longer. We're talking. So over the last 20 years, the people, and again, everybody's alive for the most part. They lost track of it. But through some social media and very diligent, fact checking, they were able to find the original negatives. Now, Lucas apparently keeps a print of everything that he's involved with.
You would figure.
Yeah.
But they actually found the original negative in, originally it was in some underground storage bunker somewhere. It was actually an old World War II bunker.
Wow.
Where they would also, they repurposed it for film archival. And they were able to piece these elements together, and then these two guys, I forget the two guys' names, but they, I think they were involved with Star Wars, with the prequels, perhaps. They, I guess, all joined forces, and there's an effort to actually bring this back to the public. They're going to restore it and try to show it in some way, shape, or form, but it just goes to show, and now, of course, it's got a 4K backup, it's got a 2K backup, it's got, every backup you could imagine.
Yeah, of course.
Because in today's day and age, the 21st century we're a data society. It's all about media management and your data. But back then, often it was one and done.
Yeah.
We shoot it and the stuff would go away. And if it wasn't a success, nobody really thought, what should we do with this thing in the future?
There was no way to repurpose it. There was
Right.
no other platform. It was shown in the theater.
No.
There was no VHS. There was no DVD, Laserdisc, nothing. There was no.
It goes
there
into
was
somebody's house.
There was no.
Pack it away.
All you would do was re-release it in the theater. That was your only revenue stream.
Right.
Now, I just want to say, I think that going forward, at least for the rest of this sequence, we should kind of let it speak for itself. I mean, I'm not a fan of dead air on commentaries, but this scene is just phenomenal. I think it's one of the...
Well, we just had a false scare.
Yeah,
right there.
I was waiting for the false
It's the
scare.
trap. They're setting the trap
But
for
they're
you.
setting the trap, and I just kind of think that now we should just kind of...
Roger Christian, by the way, Black Angel.
Oh, yes.
All right, I'll be quiet now.
That's okay.
Now, she's dressed in
Are you
red
still talking?
because they want you to
You're still
focus
talking.
on her.
Yes.
I'm giving you a little help here. Everything is white. She's red, blood red.
You and your subliminals.
You just want to scare me with the scene. That's what you want.
Camera's not moving.
Camera's
other
not
than
moving.
There we go. Other than the shaking of the film.
Very Kubrickian.
That is one difference, by the way, when you watch films, especially of this era and prior, that were shot on film, you can actually see the camera moving. See it? Upper left corner, you see it moving.
Very slight.
Oh,
What is
that's
it?
right.
Is it?
It's because the film is moving through the reels, and
Oh,
there's a
it's
natural
just the
vibration
vibration?
onto the camera
Oh, my
itself. Yeah.
God.
You don't see it in a projected form because
You don't see the edges.
Yeah.
Once the cop leaves, then that's when we should stop talking.
Pass me a blanket, Steve. All right, give me a pillow.
You're just determined to ruin this for me, aren't you?
You just want to scare me.
I want you to be a man.
Okay, everything's nice and quiet.
Dude, shut up. I love it.
And they zoom in.
I
Those
love
sons
it.
of bitches.
I love it. And what I was talking about before, the use of music. I mean,
saved it.
They
We haven't
saved
heard
it.
music in like
I
20
know.
minutes.
I love that.
But that's everything. Sound effect, music,
Yup.
they give you everything.
It's just
in
a
one shot.
perfect marriage to make a perfect scare.
This is almost like Quint in Jaws. It's like, all right, we got a real problem here. We need to get Quint over here. We need a bigger boat.
and Gemini just followed through on his promise. He got his
That was
random
one for
kill.
him. Yeah.
His random kill. And we're just getting descriptors. We're not seeing anything. And it really, I mean, it just goes to show the old ways are the ones that, we've all, the three of us, we've grown up in an era of, showing everything.
Uh-oh. What's with the green?
Herschel.
He couldn't take it. He couldn't take it. The prospect of being tortured and killed by Pazuzu was just too much for him.
Yeah. And what is that? It's not a lie detector, right? It's I don't know. I've never been.
I think it's supposed to monitor his vital signs or his neurological activity. Because if you remember before, they were talking about, for years he was just dormant, and then all of a sudden these pulses were happening. There was some sort of.
Is he like physically wired?
I think he is.
That's yeah. I mean, he's strapped to that seat.
But you mentioned before, he's not seeing him. He's seeing
Karis.
He's seeing Karis.
Okay, but we're seeing him because we're the audience.
Right.
But we saw his picture on his file, so we
so we know he's the Gemini.
Now, what would have been interesting is if indeed Jason Miller was not part of the film, the plausibility of Kinderman believing that this guy was Karis. Because without that, as the audience, it's hard to understand what he's seeing.
Right.
And that he would see Father Karis.
Mm-hmm.
When we all see Brad Dourif, we see Gemini.
Well, they would have to make it. I mean, they have to be very explicit. They say he's seeing Damian Karis, and we're like, really? Certain parties.
Sounds like a lawyer.
Yeah. Party of the second part.
And he's looking straight at the camera.
Now his hair looks right here. It looks like it's a little less curly. This is great.
Okay.
I love this though. This is great.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that raving?
Was I ranting or was I raving? I don't know what the split is or what the percentage is, but I'm pretty sure we're seeing much more of Dourif than we are of Jason Miller.
Yes.
So when the Gemini is referencing the Master, we're not sure if he's referencing Satan or Pazuzu.
Correct. Or if they're one and the same, because again, they're what's the word I'm looking for? Their take on religion, it could be the same entity for all we know. Right. You know what I mean? It's rooted in actual, and again, what is actual? We don't really know what that is.
Right. What's also interesting is the fact that what he's referencing now is the fact that it took 15 years for the demon to force the body into a position, or to the brain to act, that he just couldn't make it happen.
Right.
You think of supernatural beings, godlike beings as having the ability to just snap their fingers and do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
But he's saying, no, it took me a while to get everything, all the synapses to fire. And
right. Well, and I think it also goes back to what he was just raving about as far as Father Karras being there. He's a witness to all of this. It's grounded somewhat in reality, meaning that, yes, the supernatural force is doing all kinds of things and able to jump about, but his primary host is a person who, for all intents and purposes, was dead and brain dead. Right. So even if there was a shred of life in the gray matter, to have it take 15 years to repair enough where he could actually be able to connect with others, I think it is the limitation of evil. You know, Lucifer having been cast out, there's still a limitation in that you are not above.
You're not supreme.
You are not supreme, exactly. So you're bound by the rules, you know, just like everybody else was. Right. You know, the fact that Jesus, again, you know, based on history and what people believe, was a human, right. A supernatural human, one could argue, right. But human nonetheless and able to perish. So I think that really ties back into the whole story.
That's a good analogy. I like that. I agree with you.
Because, I mean, ultimately, yeah. See, he agrees, Carlos. I mean, they could do whatever the hell they wanted to.
Yeah.
They could say, look, you know, he's a pink unicorn, and now he's going to stab people.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But we have to come along for the ride. So
right.
the more plausible it is, and the more connection that we have to it as
mortal
atheists,
beings.
Agnostics, you know, Catholics, Jews,
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
The more believable it's going to be.
Yeah.
And they've already
swallow it.
And they've already set that tone early on with all of the the religious you know, back and forth between Father Dyer and Kinderman.
You know, you talk about the nature of evil too. Just the fact that for the last 15 years, Father Karras has been denied his eternal reward. He did a very good thing at the cost of his own life, and at the moment of death, when he would, you know, go to his reward, he's prevented. And that also brings up an interesting question. You know, you're talking about God, saying God is allowing this to happen. You know,
right?
Does he get the most airtime of this movie?
Dourif?
Yeah.
It looks that way. I was just saying to Steve that his time is far outstretching Jason Miller's.
He must have seen this role and said, "This is a juicy role."
Of course. And I mean, he's remembered for it. I mean, until Lord of the Rings came along, I mean, you know, the horror community, they owned Brad Dourif. They love Brad Dourif. Between this and Child's Play?
And Child's Play, yeah.
He still is the voice of Chucky.
But he does have a small actual on-camera role.
In Child's Play,
in the beginning.
He's the killer.
He's the murderer, Charles, whatever his face was.
But he's a character actor who can do anything. But his characters tend to be more oddball in nature.
Now, going back to the issue of an actor talking to the camera, this is done on purpose. The director wants him to talk to the camera because he wants you to be more involved.
I love it. I mean, yes, we're seeing it's Kinderman's POV, but, you know, I think in a sense, Kinderman is our surrogate in this movie. You know, he's the guy who has to swallow all of this, you know, these supernatural goings on. And he's a cop, a no-nonsense cop who's taught to believe in facts and hard evidence. And, you know, he really didn't have a lot to do with the events of the original film. You know, he kind of, the Kinderman character is in the Exorcist. He's on the periphery of the story.
Child's Play, Lieutenant. Sorry, he just. Look, there's a kid with red hair.
Yeah,
wow.
Look, he looks like Chucky.
He looks like the kid who was in like Family Affair, like all the '70s shows.
What came first, Chucky or
That's cool. The Chucky was before.
Yeah, Chucky's before this. Yeah.
Chucky was '88.
Chris Sarandon? Yay!
Yes, Chris Sarandon.
There's that fly again.
I'm sure it's on purpose.
Digital.
They're referencing the fly.
It's digital. The rose means something. It's red.
Yes.
I bet you it does.
Do you contribute?
Wait till you hear
Do you
the
contribute
commentary.
anything of value
You're
to
gonna
these
get a
commentaries?
commentary one day, and you're going to be like, Carlos was right.
Yeah. Yeah, David Cronenberg is going to say, you know what?
Don't show him dead ringers, whatever you do.
No, don't show him Crash. That's a scary movie. For all kinds of different reasons.
Yes. Okay, now we're coming up on the only original effects shot in the film. Which, again, it's just so damn creepy. Oh, maybe... Yeah, here it comes. Now, Carlos, Mr. Special Effects guy.
Oh, come on.
How the hell did they do this? I mean, we're talking pre-digital here.
All right, there's a line she's not crossing on the wide shot, which means it's two separate
That's
shots.
not her. That's a stuntman.
Okay.
That's definitely a stuntman.
That's fine. Okay, there's a line. She's not crossing a line.
right.
So that's two shots.
Right.
Okay.
It's an optical.
Right. They shoot the bottom and then they shoot,
And they shoot the top. And they flip
The top is
upside
probably
down.
upside down, flipped over.
Just that little shot. I mean, it's like, ugh.
What the? Oh.
And that, you know, here we got another
Crazy.
great scene.
Anybody order a...
This is a little bit of misdirection. And it's kind of cheap, but it's effective.
Now I forget. What did they bring this kid in here for?
I don't remember, but you know, you just saw him. Of course, it's her. The screaming harpy nurse. Uh-oh. Doesn't her voice seem like it's being dubbed?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah,
Ow.
love it.
Oh crap!
Her mother looks kind of wacky. You almost think that the mother's going to start whacking people. The mother-in-law or
Like
whatever.
a guy dressed in drag.
Yeah, I know.
Dodge Aries.
Aries K.
Again, before cell phones.
This would never have happened.
I know. You think
If
of
you
all
had
the
a
things.
cell phone.
Think of all the movies, of all the great scenes
Oh,
that would
forget
just be
it.
shot to hell.
Although Pazuzu could manipulate, the cell service.
Exactly.
I got one bar.
Pazuzu can do whatever he
Pazuzu ain't
it
LTE.
wants.
No 4G.
No 4G.
Look out! Anybody wearing a seatbelt? Here's the ominous music. Oh,
Yeah,
the chanting.
like the monks.
Kandarian demon.
Yes.
See, I used to have a Dodge Aries.
Doesn't Tony still have one?
I
What
forget
kind of car does he have? Again,
know.
people listening to this
It
commentary.
looks like a Mercury
they just went off
or a
they just went off
Dodge
the
or something like that.
ledge.
Lots of angles. Very angular.
His car is as old as this movie.
Yeah, you're right.
That's true.
You're right. Oh, it's the nurse, all right.
So I guess he registers a lot of activity when he's out.
Right, because his brain is powerful enough to be able to jump. His consciousness can mobilize.
Again, just these small little sequences are so effective. I love it. I love it. You know, I never used to notice dubbing before, but now when you do see it or hear it, it's just like, oh my God.
It's the crazy kind. Oh, she's creepy too.
Now here's another scene. Like, how is this shot? Was this shot? Did they reverse the film? Like, you guys, you're gonna have to tell me. Like, watch.
Whoa.
Oh, was that just? They just sped up the film.
I think
slowed down the film.
They sped it up a little bit, so it looks like you just missed. Now what?
How does that get shot? The way when she's backing down, like
you don't see her legs, so she could just be lowered.
You can't see right behind her back.
Right, you don't see what's being. Now, why didn't it work? Because he just showed up.
Yeah, because he knows he's got to be present to deal with this problem.
Right.
He can't fight a war on two fronts.
Right. And again, you know, while it may be unnecessary, as Steve pointed out before, I really think this is organic. It feels organic, even though it is not organic.
Plus, I'm sure not a lot of time went by between reshoots and actual shoot, right? You're not talking about years.
No.
You know all the sets are still
months,
all the sets are still there.
The most.
All the actors still under contract. So
you know what they might have done is
you got to match the makeup. That's it.
You know, they might have had a preview screening and then got the results, and maybe within a month they're reshooting.
The worst problem is trying to match haircuts.
Right. Well, that's why I felt like there were a couple of times where Brad Dourif's hair looked shorter. You know, they'd cut back to Kinderman, and then it looked like, he had a much earlier haircut.
Okay, now
we're into
who's seeing this? Us or him?
Well, I think the priest is seeing this.
Oh, yeah, it's there.
Yeah, he's
seeing this.
He's got snakes going on there. I mean, this is all manifesting. What I like too about this sequence is seeing the Karras character. This is what's hearkening back to the original, and I know that it wasn't meant. Blatty didn't want this to happen, but I like seeing Karras's body, it's like Reagan in the original, with fighting the priest.
Right. Through the body of the right.
Yeah. I love Nicole Williamson's voice. He's excellent in Excalibur as Merlin. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a terrific actor.
That's a problem.
And he doesn't he doesn't last as long as Max von Sydow did in the original. This is kind of nasty.
Yeah.
See, now this is now they're bowing to the conventions of the horror
because normally
genre.
we wouldn't have seen this.
We would not have seen any sort
They
of...
would have stayed on the supernatural.
Any gore. And that, I think, cheapens it.
So, this whole sequence wouldn't have been there. He comes back, but not to the...
He comes back and
They have like a...
confrontation.
Yeah. Kinderman and Karras kind of go at it.
Okay.
But there's no
priest.
There's no priest.
Ceiling type of thing.
Yeah.
Because, you've been in my house, now I'm coming to face you.
And I have to say that the ending of the book does not work at all for a movie. I mean, the idea that he just expires when his father dies. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do need, for a film, you do need some tension and some, theatricality.
Mm. There's no climax.
No, there isn't.
Now, does he know this other priest at all?
No, he doesn't. He knows of him only because the priest or the bishop played by Lee Richardson mentions him to Kinderman in that other expository scene. And this is also reminiscent of, in the original film, Karras walking in, seeing Father Merrin dead, and getting really, really pissed off and agitated, and he's just had it with everything, and that's when he says, "Come into me." And
now there's a somewhat digital effect.
Yeah, that looked a little like the wave, that ripple.
It's an optical, I guess.
That looks pretty good for its time. I like his monologue here, too.
Yes.
It's so great. It's so George C. Scott, too.
Mr. Scott, the question was, would you like cheese on your burger? I believe in death and destruction.
You son of a bitch!
Okay, I'll come back, sir, when you're ready to order.
Fidelity. I believe.
Sounds like he's passing a stone.
It does.
He's looking at him like, I think I like this guy. He's like, I think I picked the wrong guy.
And it's the culmination of this character who is just like, you gotta be kidding me, all this stuff going on here. I believe in hell and Satan and...
Now that's cool. Break apart,
that is
break
cool.
away floor pieces with light shining through. Obviously the lightning is optical.
Here we go. I don't know for a fact. I think this aspect, this part of the confrontation is from the original. I don't think this is a reshot sequence. Mm-hmm. Because now we're just dealing with Karras and Kinderman.
That's interesting.
Something tells me Tony has never seen this film.
Oh, ha ha, ho ho.
And again, you're seeing what the little boy looked like when he was murdered. And you talk about blasphemy.
Well, they got to outdo the first film.
Yeah. And you actually see Karras in his priest uniform. So, are we meant to believe here that God is throwing him a bone? God is.
They did try to match the makeup, so it's like Reagan's.
Yeah.
They have that chalky
And the eyes.
Yeah.
I still think it's great, despite whatever issues.
I
mean,
agree. I agree with Steve. No, but I honestly do.
well, what do you think?
Yeah, dude. What do you think? What do you think?
Get off the
ending?
fence, man.
Well, I don't have
Take
that,
a position.
I don't have that much of a one version versus the other version. To me, it's all one movie.
All right.
Well,
so
all right.
what is
So-
your
so
assessment as one movie? Then?
pretend we never had any discussion about it.
To me, it matches. There is no jerkiness.
What an uplifting ending. I gotta say, I love this movie. I'm just really pleased that over the years, finally, everyone just came around to my way of thinking.
Yeah.
Our way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at least he made it. Or did he? Uh-oh. Why are they all thinking?
And now Damien is at peace.
Oh, 1975.
Well,
So,
the movie came out in 73.
no, but wait a minute.
73, the 40th anniversary Blu-ray just
No, but
came
wait a
out.
minute. My question is this. This is supposed to be 1990.
Yes.
But didn't he...
Well, they're giving his actual date of death.
Oh, they reset it back to that day.
Yes.
Instead of
Yes.
1990.
Right.
Okay. I get it.
Harry Carey Jr. was the priest. So, all I can say is Samuel Jackson. I just hope, I don't think this film, I can watch it over and over again but just from a perspective of somebody who loves film and loves alternate versions, I would kill to see the original.
Mm-hmm. But I also think it proves the point of how films like this and films of this genre, the genre that we love talking about, do often find their love. They get their props many years later.
Yes.
They get a cult status, and then people are able to appreciate them many years later.
Now, I know we talked about how, for whatever reason, they decided to do a prequel at some point, but was there any ever talk of continuing this line?
Not to my knowledge.
This timeline?
Not to my knowledge. And I think this puts a nice point on it. I mean, the story is over.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you something. The Dominion prequel to The Exorcist, and I forget what the other one's actually called. The other prequel, the two versions. I don't have a problem with their existence. The Rennie Harlan one I think is terrible. The Mazursky version, which is the one that was released after, because after the Harlan one bombed, they were like, well, let's release this one too. I think it's effective. I don't have a problem with it, but I certainly don't think it's anywhere near as good as this film. And this film, it may not rise to the level of the original directed by William Friedkin, which is just, in my mind, it's the scariest movie ever made. I'll go right out there and say it. But the analogy that I made before between 2001 and 2010, when you continue the story of a classic, you're always behind the eight ball. You're always going to be judged against it, and I don't think that's fair. Because I think this film holds its own. It really holds its own.
Mm-hmm. It was Schrader, by the way.
Schrader, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Thank you for correcting me.
The other Paul.
Yes.
And Skarsgård played same role in both movies, right?
Yes, he was in both movies. So if you want to see
Dream Quest Images, I'm sure this company doesn't exist anymore.
Watch the trailer, to see the morphing scene, and go to legion.the9thconfiguration.com, which has a lot of information about deleted scenes. It has scans of original articles that came out around the time of the release of this film from like Fangoria magazine and other genre publications that actually do reference the fact that there were reshoots in this film. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't something that they slid under the rug.
And with that, we come to a close.
Yes, I would like to thank both Steve, and even myself. I'll thank myself for joining us today with this somewhat of a classic. I mean, it's only 1990. 1990 to me, it feels like it was like maybe 2-3 years ago, but it was
23 years ago. Mm-hmm.
So thank you, everybody, and I hope to have you guys join us again next time on Geek Fest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Keep a straight head on your shoulders there, folks.
Take me! Come into me! Take me!
In 1973, an extraordinary motion picture stunned our senses and uncovered our deepest fears in a way no film had ever done before. When it was over, we thought the terror had ended, but it had just begun. Morgan Creek proudly presents The Exorcist III: Legion. Written and directed by William Peter Blatty, creator of The Exorcist.
I agree with Steve, agreeing with Steve.
I want you to be a man. Dude, shut up.